I wasted my 20s, and there are a few things that I learned in that time that I'm going to teach you now because I'm hoping that by giving you those lessons, I can save you from some of the pain that I had to go through to learn them. I wish that I could say that I was one of those really bright young people who graduated college early and hustled and made their first million by the time they turned 25, but that just isn't true. I pissed away my 20s doing absolutely nothing of value. But I don't regret it, which isn't to say that I don't regret certain things that happened, but I was able to grow and develop and become a better person because of the mistakes that I made. And so I wanted to start off this video with a really big disclaimer. I had a very unfair advantage growing up and going into adulthood that not a lot of people have. I came from a very tight-knit and supportive family. We fought and there was dysfunction, but nothing that I would call abusive. We weren't rich. My mom was a single mom working to raise 2 boys, but we never went to bed hungry. I grew up in a good area. I went to a good school, and I was surrounded on basically all sides by very successful people. And even though I was considered the poor kid in my community, I would still say that I came from a place of extreme privilege. And I don't think that it takes away from the message or the intention behind this video for me to admit that. That being said, it wouldn't have been honest of me not to at least acknowledge that straight out of the gate. And it's important context going into this video because lesson number 1 is you are not a victim. Beyond just acknowledging how fortunate I was growing up, I wanted to start this video by saying that I take full accountability for my past and my choices. I'm not a victim of circumstance. And in fact, the circumstances were stacked pretty heavily in my favor. I really did have everything going for me. But for the longest time, I didn't believe that I did. And when you're trapped in a dark place, it's very hard not to believe that circumstances or God or the universe or what have you is conspiring against you. My mom and my grandma, who primarily raised me, did a very good job of trying to prepare me for what I was going to face when the time came for me to leave the nest. But once I finally did reach adulthood, the freedom that I gained was so sudden and so overwhelming that it was liberating, but it was also very terrifying. For me personally, entering into adulthood, the distance between where I started and where I wanted to be was so vast and so insurmountable that I eventually chose to just stay in my comfort zone. I let that fear of the unknown overwhelm me. And in hindsight, that was a huge mistake. If success in life is measured based on the progress that you make relative to where you start, which it is, then by choosing not to advance and by refusing to leave my comfort zone, I effectively chose to die because I didn't know how to live. By choosing not to advance, I limited the scope of what was actually achievable in my life because I effectively backed myself into a corner where my progress became stunted. And when I was stuck in that corner, I bought into this narrative that the world was all bad and broken and that we were doomed and that abundance and success weren't achievable. That the future that I dreamed of for myself was impossible, because I didn't have the confidence in myself or the roadmap that I really needed to achieve it. And for me personally, without being able to envision a future for myself, I started living a very fatalistic lifestyle. It's only with the gift of hindsight that I've been able to acknowledge and come to terms with the fact that I became an alcoholic for several years. At first, partying for me and my friends was just a celebration of our newfound adulthood and our liberation from the shackles of our youth. But I was a broken person, searching for answers in substances and parties and in other broken people, not understanding that they were just as lost and damaged as I was. And as time went on, it became less and less sustainable. I stopped going to my classes. I failed out of college. I wound up in academic probation and working a dead-end retail job and spending all of my money on things that would help me detach from the pain of the situation that I put myself in. And all of these things that I was doing would make me feel better for a few hours, a night maybe, but all I was really doing was distracting myself from the fact that I was just as far from where I wanted to be as I was when I started. In fact, I would go so far as to say that I was even further, because now if I did want to go back to school and I did want to start working towards a degree or towards any of those goals, I would have to retake all of those classes just to get myself off of academic probation. And the reality really sank in that I would need to work 10 times as hard just to get back to the starting line. I felt doomed. At first, I told myself that I was just unlucky and that bad things were happening to me. But the truth was that I was making bad choices, and the failure that I was experiencing was a consequence of those choices. I chose to stay in my comfort zone and to give up on my goals. I chose to start drinking. I chose to stop going to my classes. I chose failure. I was not a victim at all. And it wasn't until I saw an interview with somebody famous, I can't remember who, but they were asked a question about Hollywood parties or something about that. And they said something to the effect of, if a party is a celebration and you're not where you want to be in your life, what are you celebrating? And the answer for me was nothing. I wasn't celebrating at all. I was just going out and getting loaded to escape the consequence of my choices. And it wasn't until I stopped denying it that my life began to change. And that's why this is the first lesson. What you choose to do early on will either put you on the path to success or it will trap you. And I know because it trapped me for 7 years. One moment I was 18 and I was graduating high school and I was getting drunk for the first time to celebrate. And the next moment I was 25, I was an alcoholic, and I was a burnout. And it wasn't circumstance that put me there. It was my choices. And so lesson 2 is to hold yourself accountable. As far back as I can remember, even in middle school, I had pretty major issues with my body image, and those carried into adulthood. And because I hated my body, I developed very unhealthy relationships with food. I wouldn't eat for most of the day, or I would go 1 or 2 days without eating at all, and then I would usually binge eat. And once I started drinking, and I wouldn't eat all day, and then I'd go out and get drunk, and then I would eat too much when I was drunk to the point of purging everything. And after a couple of years of that, I lost 60 pounds. And even though I had gotten down to a weight that was closer to what I thought that I wanted, and people told me that I looked good, I wasn't proud of my weight loss. I didn't look in the mirror and see somebody that I could feel good about or that I thought looked good. I just looked and felt sick and weak, and my skin was literally green. That's how bad it was. And when I reached my lowest weight, still to this day in my life, I got a lot of unprompted advice from people telling me that I looked great and I just needed to love myself and feel confident. But I had nothing to feel confident about. I didn't see a version of myself that I could love when I looked in the mirror. I didn't earn my weight loss through hard work or a healthy lifestyle. I lost weight because I was so unhealthy. I was starving myself and poisoning myself, and I wasn't fit. I was frail. But even after I quit the habit of binge drinking, those poor eating habits that I had developed, they stuck around. I had traded the poison of alcohol for the poison of food. And I continued to poison myself because I was trying to comfort myself. I needed to comfort myself because I wasn't accepting my flaws and actually working to improve them. I wasted years trying to take a shortcut to self-love by treating myself and overindulging and telling myself that that was self-love. And that's why the idea of self-love is so tricky, because if you love yourself blindly, it can lead to disastrous results. So instead of self-love, I started to work on self-acceptance. And that might sound like the same thing, but there's actually a really big difference. Let me explain. So everyone is the hero of their own story, right? But that doesn't make us unimpeachable. We make choices, and our choices have consequences. And there are going to be bumps in the road and moments where we're going to act in ways that are unbecoming of the person that we want to be. You are going to behave poorly in your life. You're going to make mistakes and embarrass yourself. You are going to fail, and you're going to feel bad about it. And that's okay. But that doesn't mean that you can stop trying to be better. It doesn't mean that you can say, woe is me, and then roll over and double down on bad behavior. When you make a mistake, you're given an opportunity by life to practice humility and apologize to whoever you've wronged, even if it's just yourself. But apologies don't mean anything, and mistakes can't be made into a positive unless you hold yourself accountable and actually adjust the behavior. And that's the key difference between this idea of self-acceptance and the idea of self-love. Accountability. Holding yourself accountable, to me, means disciplining yourself when you do things that hurt people or hurt yourself. And it's not an easy thing to do. A mentor of mine who I really look up to once told me that mediocrity is like gravity. We all want comfort, and in the pursuit of comfort, we do these small things every day that add up over time, and the combined weight of those things is really enough to pull us down. And rising above your worst impulses and that desire for comfort is really a daily struggle, but if you're lucky, you won't have to do it alone. And that's where the whole idea of accountability partners comes from. I'm grateful that I've had friends and family in my life who have lifted me up and held me to a higher standard when I behaved in a way that was unbecoming of the person that I wanted to be. They held me accountable even when I gave up on myself and when I was making a ton of mistakes and would say and do a lot of hurtful things. There are a lot of people who deserved apologies from me. And I've been very lucky that most of the people who I've wronged have been gracious enough to allow me the opportunity to try to do better and to apologize. And it's this ability to hold yourself accountable, to admit your flaws and commit to improving yourself that separates self-acceptance and real self-love from just toxic narcissism. It wasn't until I was 27 and I went through a particularly rough breakup that I decided that I just didn't want to do this anymore. I had to take a hard look at myself for the first time and really come to terms with the fact that I hated myself. I had denied for so long all of the things that I was doing and saying and believing that were misaligned and holding me back from becoming that version of myself that I really wanted to become. And I took inventory of those things. And over time, I became more aligned with that ideal version of myself. It's a daily process, like I said before, and I'm constantly working on self-improvement. But now, I'm not the skinniest I've ever been, but I am the healthiest. I'm the strongest, and I'm making the most money I've ever made in my life. I love doing what I'm doing. I'm excited by life. I broke the cycle. And as a consequence of that choice and all of the other little choices that I've made in the years since, I've really started to take steps towards loving myself and to becoming genuinely happy and satisfied with myself for the first time in my life. And all I had to do was stop living in denial, to actually look at myself and admit to myself all of the ways that I could be better and to hold myself accountable. And it took me almost 30 years to do that. And lesson number 3 is to be grateful. Chase Hughes, a retired military behavioral analyst and best-selling author, wrote that gratitude is the most powerful feeling that you can have, and it will take the place of negative inner conflicts. My life became infinitely better once I accepted that this was true. Once I started to step outside and look beyond myself and think about my lived experience in a really broad historical context, and I'm talking thousands of years. People used to have to hunt for food, to build their shelter, to fight for their survival. And while the world today is not a perfect place by any means, it never has been. The systems that make up modern society are not perfect. They're inequitable. They fail often. And in most cases, they serve only the richest and most powerful among us. But they're still a gift. By merely existing in the time and place that we exist, we are gifted with so much more potential than any other generation that came before us. The potential to be so much more, to have so much more, to have such a greater impact on the world around us than at any other time in history. We have so much infrastructure, so much of the work has been done for us, and I truly believe that success, monetary or otherwise, has never been more democratized than it is today. To give you the most immediate example that comes to my mind, 20 years ago, if I wanted to appear on a screen and communicate an idea like this to an audience like you, I would have needed to go to Hollywood and pitch it to investors, to raise millions of dollars and wrangle a crew of dozens of people and deal with a weeks-long logistical nightmare of production. And then I would have to spend millions of dollars more on editing and distribution. But I'm able to sit here in my apartment and speak my message into my phone and cut it together and put it on YouTube all by myself without needing any outside help. And that's how incredible the world is. But for the longest time, I was blind to the fact that I had these or any resources whatsoever. Because of that victim mentality that I had cultivated, I was incapable of identifying opportunities for growth and success even when they were right in my face. But what I've come to realize is that opportunities are literally everywhere around us because information is everywhere. All you need to do is look for it. If you wanted to learn how to start a business, all you would have to do is Google it, and you can find hundreds of lists of hundreds of books written by hundreds of authors who are either currently doing or have already done exactly what you want to do. And they'll give you all of the answers. Now, this one may seem simple to you because it is kind of a no-brainer, but I wish that I had realized this sooner. I wish that I could go back and tell my 18-year-old self to start looking for answers in books and stop looking for them in bottles. I'm not saying that things are perfect. They aren't, and they never will be. I'm not trying to just be another white dude screaming into the void that if you just pull yourself up by the bootstraps, everything will work out great. A lot of people are suffering. You are probably suffering in some way, and a lot of people aren't capable of taking advantage of these opportunities that I'm talking about. I'm not taking that struggle and that suffering away from anybody. All I'm saying is, we live in an incredible time and an incredible place to be alive. And I hope that you won't do what I did and waste years of your life whining about the fact that you weren't born on third base, when the hard truth is that the majority of people living today and the majority of people in human history weren't even born in the game. If you're watching this, that means that you're one of the lucky ones. You have some kind of advantage that you're not taking advantage of. And if you have a good head on your shoulders, hopefully you can recognize that you have something in your life to be grateful for. So count your blessings. Don't waste them. To wrap things up, what are the really big takeaways that I hope that you get from this video? The sooner you stop seeing yourself as a victim, the sooner you're going to start to create a more successful life for yourself. And if you hold yourself accountable, you put in the work to align yourself with the most ideal version of yourself, then you're going to start accepting and loving yourself and finding the confidence that you need to succeed. And through it all, you have to practice gratitude for all the things you have, all the things that you take for granted, even when things aren't going the way that you wish that they could. I've been able to change my life in ways that I could never have thought possible once I started to learn these hard lessons. And I'm giving them to you now because it took me almost 30 years to actually start putting in this work and to start seeing the changes and to become the person who I wanted to be. And if I could go back and help my past self see a little bit clearer and save myself some trouble and years of pain, I would do that. But I can't. All I can do is admit that I've been very fortunate in my life and try to pay it forward to you. I don't know who you are, but I appreciate you watching this video. And consider subscribing. I'm putting out stuff like this pretty regularly, and I would love to see you in the next one. Take care.